name's Ellie and welcome to this, our second event of our events fortnight, Reassure. Is there more to prayer than reassurance? To catch up on our first event, which is on how to find peace in an unpredictable world, head to our Facebook page, that's Real 2021, or our YouTube channel, which is UEACU. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to hear more about prayer. And to help us do that, we're going to be hearing from Lizzie and Naomi, who are going to be sharing some of their experiences of prayer. And then we'll have a short talk from Mike Hood, who I'll introduce later. But first, let's hear from Naomi. Naomi is an amazing first-year student here at UEA, and she's a member of CU. And she's going to share with us a time that she was praying a lot through a difficult time in her life.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to talk about a moment in my life where I had to deal with unanswered prayer. So last year I went out to India with three other people on a team, and I had to deal with a really difficult situation with a boy. It was really difficult for me to live through that, and I remember praying every day constantly about it, and praying with the person and on my own, and God was just not answering the prayer. The situation wasn't getting better and the prayer was not being answered for me. But now that it's been a year and that I looked through how it happened, I still don't understand why it had to happen, or why it happened to me, and how much pain I went through. But I know that God was there throughout it all, because I remember seeing now, looking through it all and seeing how God actually was teaching me things, saying to me, be patient, actually I do love you. And the verse that really helped me through it all was that in Psalm 27:13 it says that I remain confident of this, I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And it just makes me think that actually we're not made for this time on earth. This life is so short, this life is so hard sometimes, and we have so much pain and sorrow, but actually we should all be looking forward to the life we're going to have in eternity, which is so much better and so different. So I just encourage you to, even though sometimes God doesn't answer the prayers, you should look to the bigger picture and see the bigger things.
Thanks so much, Naomi. That was really great to hear about your really honest experience of prayer. I personally really loved what you said about how God was teaching you through prayer. Maybe stuff that you didn't expect but that you needed to hear. And about how prayer shifts your focus to that eternity that we have with Jesus. That's so great, thank you. Now we're going to listen to Lizzie. Lizzie is a second-year economics student, and another crucial fact about her is that she can lick her nose with her tongue. Whoa. Now we're going to listen to her as she shares a couple of her experiences of how she's seen God working through prayer.
Hi, I'm Lizzie, and here are a few examples of how prayer has affected my life and the life of those around me. One example is I used to really struggle to fall asleep. There was an event that happened in my life which caused me a lot of stress and anxiety, which really messed my sleep pattern up. And I was really struggling, so I went to a few friends and asked them to pray for me. They prayed, and that night I slept soundly for the first time in a long time, and my sleep wasn't affected by that event ever since, which is a real answer to prayer. Another event that happened is on my gap year. I had a friend called Sophie who had either back or hip problems. I can't quite remember, and it turned out it was caused by one of her legs being longer than the other. So we prayed over her legs, we prayed that she'd be healed, and one of her legs grew in front of our eyes, which was quite a surreal moment and a real answer to prayer. She was actually had been booked to give a talk about healing in a few days after that, so she had a real life experience to draw from, which was pretty cool. So that's a few examples of how God has affected my life and the life of those around me in prayer.
Wow, thanks so much, Lizzie. That was really amazing to hear about how God works through prayer in those everyday and behind the scenes things, but also to bring about big life changes like with your friend. That's so amazing, thank you. We're now going to hear from Mike Hood. Mike grew up just a few minutes away from Shakespeare's birthplace and funnily enough went on to study English literature at uni. He now works for UCCF, the charity that supports Christian unions, to help students share the beauty and reality of Jesus in the crazy but wonderful context of university. His favourite pastimes include writing, playing football, and eating cheesecake. And now we're going to hear from him as he shares a bit more with us about prayer. So yeah, take it away, Mike.
Prayer is a very strange thing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, it seems like it's this deeply natural human thing to do, because people throughout history and across the world in all kinds of different cultures and backgrounds and belief systems have felt this deep need to pray. But at the same time, it seems like it's a completely unnatural thing to do. I mean, if you ask Richard Dawkins, he'll tell you that it's just talking to someone or something that doesn't exist. And it's very hard to see how that could be helpful, actually, either to survival or to passing on your genes or to anything else, really. So it's this weird thing where it seems like we have this deep sense, maybe something that's been kind of dampened down by our upbringing, or maybe something that's been amplified. But either way, it's kind of there, and we don't quite know what to do with it. So Julian Barnes, the author, once said, "I don't believe in God, but I miss him." Would you remember when there were those terrible attacks in France a while back, and suddenly everywhere there's this hashtag pray for Paris? Or more recently, there was a study done during the pandemic that said that for every 80,000 new COVID cases, the number of Google searches about prayer doubled. And that was across 75 different countries in all kinds of different life situations. So kind of whoever we are, when we realize that we need help, when we realize that we need hope, we kind of think that maybe we should pray, but we're Googling it because we just don't really know how. So in the next few minutes, I just want to suggest two things. One, that real prayer is amazing, that it's so much better than we'd ever guess. And two, that real prayer is a mess, that it's way more confusing than we'd like. Let me show you what I mean. There's a story that people tell about a boy who really wants a bike for Christmas. And so on Christmas Eve, he gets on his knees, he puts his hands together, he closes his eyes, he says, "Dear Jesus, please give me a bike for Christmas." He gets up the next day, goes downstairs, there's no bike under the tree. So that night he gets on his knees again, he says, "Dear Jesus, if I am good all year, please will you give me a bike next Christmas?" So he does his best to be good all year, it's really hard. Next Christmas Eve, he prays, "Dear Jesus, I did my very best, please would you give me a bike?" Gets up the next morning, goes downstairs, there's no bike. So he thinks about what to do all of that next year. And when it gets round to Christmas Eve again, he gets up in the middle of the night and he sneaks out of his house and down to the churchyard of the village church where there's a kind of nativity scene. And he reaches past the crib and gets out this figure of Mary and takes it home, sneaks it up to his room, and then he kneels down, puts his hands together, closes his eyes and says, "Jesus, give me a bike for Christmas or you'll never see your mother again." Now, I find that quite funny, but actually it's weird because throughout the history of religion, but also just in our own kind of rooms in private moments, we tend to make the same kinds of guesses as that kid. Maybe we don't think that we can blackmail God, but we do think we need to kind of strike a deal with him. Maybe we sort of say, "Look, I'll do this for you if you'll do that for me. I'll be good for you if you'll be good to me." We sort of assume that we need to come to God bringing either bringing like a payment or achieving some kind of perfection. But the thing is, either of those guesses just make us miserable. Because either we realize that we haven't kept up to our side of the deal and so we just feel guilty, or we get bitter and self-righteous because we think God hasn't lived up to his side of things. But Christianity has very good news for us. Because Christianity says, you don't have to guess what God's like. God is like Jesus. Jesus said, "If you've seen me, you have seen the Father." And so when you look at how people got in touch with Jesus, it is amazing. Imagine the scene with me. Jesus is on an urgent mission. He's been called to go and heal a dying young girl. And this huge crowd is pressing in around him. And there's this woman pushing through the crowd towards Jesus, except that she shouldn't be there. She has been suffering for 12 years with this terrible, life-threatening, deeply embarrassing condition. She's got this kind of permanent menstrual bleeding. You can only imagine how miserable that would have made her life. This constant chore of finding and washing rags. She'd have been really unwell. But actually, beyond all of the physical stuff, probably even worse, in that culture, it would have meant that everything she touched was ritually unclean, contaminated. No one would have wanted to be close to her or to touch her. And it's been happening for 12 years. So if this bleeding started in puberty, she's maybe in her mid-20s. And she's condemned to a life without romance, without hugs, without hope. The only physical touch she's getting from other human beings are these doctors who, it says that they take all of her money and they leave her worse than she was to begin with. But she's heard about Jesus and she has this desperate hope because she's heard about the healings that he's done and she thinks that he could change things. It says she thinks, if I just touch his cloak, I will be healed. And so she's pushing through the crowd. And actually that itself is a pretty morally ambiguous thing to do because she's jostling against all kinds of people who would have been deeply upset if they'd known. And she doesn't ask for anyone's consent. She's also willing to delay Jesus on his way to heal this dying girl. So she puts her interests ahead of the crowd and ahead of this girl. And what's more, the whole plan is to touch Jesus, a touch that would have made him ritually unclean without his consent. It's a pretty ambiguous thing for her to do. And as she's kind of covering her face, jostling through this crowd, she is nothing like what we would imagine the ideal prayer to be. She's bringing no payment of any kind. She has nothing to offer Jesus. In fact, by touching him, she'll be taking from him. She hasn't achieved any kind of perfection. She is bringing nothing but years of pain and shame and guilt and a desperate hope that Jesus could change things. And then she grabs hold of Jesus' cloak. And what happens? Immediately her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. That's it. Jesus just gives her what she has been desperately longing for all of these years, and it is totally free. She has done nothing to earn it, nothing to deserve it. I don't know if there could be a more vivid picture of the way that prayer, according to Jesus, is not about us mastering some kind of technique. It's not about us earning something or deserving something. It's not really about us at all. She just grabs hold of Jesus and kindness and wholeness and life just flow out of him. But here comes the shock. Jesus doesn't want payment, he doesn't want perfection, but he does want something. See, as soon as he realizes what's happened, he stops, he turns around, and he says, "Who was it that touched me?" The disciples think he's being stupid. They're like, "We're in this massive crowd, people are touching you all the time. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he is just looking around intently, looking for who it was. He won't move on. He's not okay with leaving this interaction as it is. Everyone else in the crowd is thinking, "Come on, hurry, Jesus, the little girl." But he won't leave it. And eventually this woman steps out of the crowd and falls on her knees, and trembling with fear, she tells Jesus the whole story. All of her pain, her hope, her plan, her pushing through the crowd, her grabbing his cloak, and her healing. And as she talks about her illness, the crowd would have been backing away. No one would have wanted to be close to her, but Jesus doesn't move away. He just looks her in the eyes and he says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." You can hear the tenderness in his voice in that one word, daughter. And with one word, he describes the relationship that he's been making everybody wait around in order for him to create. This relationship of deep, committed care and love. Daughter. And he says, "Your faith has healed you." Faith just means trust. So he's trying to just show her that it's not so much that she got hold of him physically that made the difference. It's that she trusted him. She put her hope in him. She took hold of him in that much deeper sense. And he invites her into peace and into freedom. He publicly accepts her and welcomes her. He deals publicly with her guilt and her shame. See, here's my favorite thing about this story. Why do you think that that woman just tried to grab Jesus and didn't actually ask him to heal her? I think it's because she thought that he wouldn't have the time for her, that he would be too busy, that she would be too insignificant, too shameful, that he wouldn't want to know her. But when we see Jesus stop and turn and look for her, we see him crouch down and listen to her. We hear him call her daughter. She realizes, and we realize, that he does want to know her. That he desperately wants to find her and listen to her and forgive her and welcome her into a relationship with him like a father has with his child. And then you've got to remember that Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen what God's like. So in this moment, we're seeing right into the heart of God himself and right into the heart of what real prayer is. You see, God doesn't just want to kind of give you what you want and let you slip away into the crowd. He wants a relationship. He wants to listen to you. He wants to forgive you. He wants to welcome you into his family forever. That is what real prayer is about. It's about getting to know that God. It's about speaking to him, about getting to know him as you read the Bible. It's about listening to him. It's about knowing that he loves you, knowing that you are not alone. And it's amazing. It is so much better than we would ever guess. But at the same time, we've got to be honest, it's also an absolute mess. It's not, it doesn't work like we would want it to work, like I want it to work most of the time. But the thing is that it's amazing and it's messy for exactly the same reason. It's far more than we'd ever dare hope for, and it's also not quite what we asked for the same reason, because it's a relationship. See, some people will talk about prayer kind of like it's a technique for controlling your mind, to be at peace, to get yourself in a good place. A bit like yoga, basically, but without the stretching. Or some people swap it around and they talk about it like prayer is using your mind to control other stuff. So if you say the right words, or if you believe the right things hard enough, you can just get things. But prayer, according to Jesus, is not neat like that. Because it's not about control. It's a relationship. It's about him caring for us. And relationships are never neat. And it's not under our control because that's not how relationships work either. You know, if your relationship with another person is under your control, then there's something seriously wrong, especially if that person is God. So I'm not at all ashamed to admit that I find prayer frustrating and confusing sometimes. You know, sometimes it feels great and intimate and joyful. Other times it doesn't really feel like anything at all. Sometimes it's really obvious how God has answered my prayers. He's given me things that I've asked for. Things have changed. There's stuff that happens that I just can't explain it without God. But other times he hasn't given me what I've asked for. But as much as I wish that he had, and as much that I wish that everything was very neat and tidy, actually this messiness is exactly what I should expect. Because as we've just seen, yeah, Jesus does love to give us what we want and what we ask for sometimes. But other times he doesn't. He doesn't want to give us what we ask for. And he has all kinds of good reasons for that. And actually, I ended up thinking about that. I've written a whole blog exploring why that is, because we just don't have time for it all here. But the point is, either way, that is not the main thing. Because it's actually all about relationship. He doesn't promise that he'll give us whatever we ask for, but he does promise to give us himself. So is prayer more than reassurance? Well, yes, absolutely, obviously. Actually, sometimes it's not that reassuring, because having a relationship with God, it challenges us, it humbles us, it leads us out of our comfort zones. But at the same time, on a deeper level, it is the most reassuring thing imaginable. To know that the God of the universe has searched for you and found you, and he's crouching down and listening to you, and he calls you daughter, he calls you son. So why not try it? Why not just try praying and saying, God, if you're there and if you're really like this, then I want to know you. And why not let him use these events in real to start doing that? But I also realize that this question raises so many deep, deep questions. And I would love to hear your questions about it, and I'd love to be able to respond to them. So please do send them in.
Thank you, Mike. That was a really super thought-provoking message, and yeah, really cool how God wants a relationship with each one of us and how prayer is really key to that. Thank you. That's all from us today. Please tune in tomorrow for our panel discussion at 2:00, which is called Can Human Beings Solve the Problems They've Created? That's all from us now. Thanks for tuning in and see you soon. Goodbye.